Hello, everyone, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian Podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else you find podcasts, and also on my Patreon page, where you do get early access to my episodes and exclusive content. Link will be down in the show notes. So, we've made it to the end of another week, and I don't know if it's just me, but this week just feels like it was really long. Like, this week feels like it was 2 weeks long, and I don't really know why. I mean, it wasn't really all that eventful of a week. It just felt like a really long week. Maybe it's just me, but let's go ahead and get into the events of this week. One of the biggest stories that came out of this past week was the House Intelligence Committee released their report, which I gave that its own episode. So if you want to go back, it is the episode before this one. So I kind of give my thoughts and discussions on the executive summary of the report. One thing I did want to mention, though, that I didn't talk about in that episode, because mainly I was just focusing on the findings of that report and kind of the House Intelligence Committee's verdict on everything that they heard as far as their testimony and everything is concerned. In the actual report itself, there are phone records that apparently were congressionally subpoenaed, and they are very interesting. They ended up getting Rudy Giuliani's phone records. They got Lev Parnas's, which, if you don't know that name, keep it in your head. That is going to become a name that you are probably going to have to become kind of familiar with. And in the course of this, and I'm not entirely sure how this process went down because we have not seen the congressional subpoenas or anything, but Devin Nunes's phone records were also subpoenaed and gotten from AT&T. And yeah, they were a little interesting. Apparently, Devin Nunes was in contact with Rudy Giuliani on a fairly regular basis, and also with Parnas, which Nunes is playing stupid on, like he doesn't know who that is or what the hell's going on. Which, just to kind of give you a little bit of a backdrop on Parnas, he is another one of Rudy Giuliani's clients. American-born, operated in the Ukraine, and is just generally speaking a shady dude who is right now, I don't think he's in prison yet, but he has been convicted of campaign finance violations for contributions to both the Clinton and the Trump campaigns in 2016. So, dude was definitely playing both sides of the bench there. But yeah, this is something that is going to kind of become, I think, a bit of a scandal, because if it comes out that Devin Nunes was in regular contact with these two, and he was also sitting there as the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, acting a damn fool in the process, and that he was involved in this whole clusterfuck, oh boy. Yeah, no, that's going to be a real bad day for Nunes, but that remains to be seen. People are starting to question him about it, and like I said, he's playing stupid, like he don't know nothing, but it's like, dude, the records are right there. And as far as the records are concerned, there's also, when you look at Giuliani's phone records, there are phone calls that are placed to the White House at various key times in this whole Ukrainian clusterfuck that these people somehow managed to bumblefuck their way into. So, yeah, it's one more kind of shred of proof that Giuliani needs to testify under oath, and Trump needs to testify under oath, and it's beginning to look like Nunes needs to testify under oath too, because if he was involved in all this, and he didn't recuse himself from being the ranking member on House Intelligence during these questions, yeah, nope, bad day for Devin, but that remains to be seen. So, moving on from that, surprise news that happened this past week. On Monday, Kamala Harris dropped out of the Democratic primary, which I say surprising because, I mean, leading up to this, like over the past weekish or so, there have been reports coming out in the mainstream press about how her campaign is just awful. There's so much internal strife going on. It's just poorly managed. She's a horrible candidate to work for. Just all these pieces coming out. And her camp had been defending her against these pieces. And then all of a sudden, like, I don't know how much advanced knowledge they got, but she just kind of dropped out, saying that from a financial perspective, it just there wasn't enough money for her to keep going, which is interesting because from reports that I've seen, she still has $10 million in the bank. And her past debate performance, which, I mean, even I had to admit when I did the last debate roundup, as much as I don't like Kamala, and I'm happy to see her gone, the last debate performance was definitely one of her better ones. It still wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but if you stack that next to, say, the two preceding that, she came off a hell of a lot better, so it seemed like maybe she could turn things around, but she has officially dropped out, which, bye Felicia, bye Kamala, nobody liked you anyway, bye cop. Finally, I wished for something and it happened. I said Kamala should go away, and she went away. Maybe I should start wishing for more people to go away and they'll go away. But the narrative that's come out since she dropped out is, I mean, take a wild guess. The black woman dropped out. What do you think people are saying? Of course, it's because America just wasn't ready for a black woman president. And first off, I'm sorry, this wasn't the general election. This is the Democratic primary. So you're not saying America isn't ready for a black woman president. You're saying Democrats aren't ready for a black woman president. And her polling numbers have been abysmal. I mean, she did have that moment when she first started where she was considered a frontrunner or at least top tier, and everything's just kind of fallen off significantly since. So, I mean, poll number wise, it makes sense, although obviously there are people that are polling way lower than Kamala who are still in the race, like one Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi outlasted Kamala. That's awesome. But yeah, I was kind of surprised that she threw in the towel, especially before Iowa. But Kamala's gone. Bye, Kamala. No, it wasn't racism. No, it wasn't sexism. She was just a shitty candidate. I mean, she's just a shitty candidate, and nobody liked her. But, of course, it always has to be a thing that, oh, it's because she was black. No. She could have been pink with purple polka dots, and nobody would have liked her anyway. So, like I said, that feels like it happened like a month ago, and it happened like a week ago. Like, we talked about it, and then everybody just kind of forgot about Kamala, which is fine by me. Who was it? I think Joe Biden floated the idea of maybe having her as VP. No, don't do that, Joe. Anyway, so that happened. Bye, Kamala. Moving on to things more relevant than Kamala Harris, which that's not hard, is it? I'm happy she's gone. Whatever. Bye. This whole field needs to start weeding itself out one way or the other. I mean, it's about to be January of 2020. They've got to get this number down somehow. I've said it time and time again. So just start culling the field, DNC. Do something. Anyway, moving on to things a little more relevant. On Wednesday, we had another impeachment hearing. Impeachment hearings for forever until we die, apparently. Or this finally goes to the Senate, which I'm still not entirely sure when that's going to happen. But anyway, on Wednesday, the House Judiciary Committee did hold its hearing. And I had mentioned in the last weekly roundup what the topic of the hearing was supposed to be, and it pretty much did conform to that. And the point of this hearing was not to bring in, like, fact witnesses or anything like that. It wasn't the point of the hearings the way like the House Intelligence Committee's hearings were. The point of this hearing was to bring in constitutional scholars to talk on and to be questioned on the constitutionality of impeachment and if there is grounds for impeachment in this particular case. And this is also obviously post House Intelligence report being dropped. So everybody was supposed to have read the report. And so the point of this hearing was to kind of from a more like logistical, legal, constitutional perspective to discuss the topic of impeachment, and especially in this particular case. So there were 4 constitutional scholars brought on. I'll get to talking about Turley's argument in a second, because the other 3 were picked by Democrats. Turley was picked by the Republicans, and the ones picked by Democrats, by and large, agreed that, yes, impeachable offenses have occurred. Yes, impeachment would be proper in this particular state, in this particular instance. So there's that. Anyway, the big thing to come out of this whole hearing, which, by the way, I don't disagree with the idea of having this hearing in theory. I would have rather it happened behind closed doors, because I do think that there was value in bringing in constitutional scholars for questioning, for people who might have questions on procedure or legality, or whether what the House Intelligence Committee found to have taken place from witness testimony rises to the level of an impeachable offense, according to constitutional scholars and people who have something more of a legal basis to determine whether something meets the standards of high crimes and misdemeanors. I don't think that's a bad idea. In fact, I think that would have been a very good idea had it been done with no cameras and no mics, just in a closed door meeting. But because it wasn't, you get all of the jackassery that comes along with the cameras and the mics. And one of the constitutional scholars, Pamela Karlan, made a stupid joke. Now, mind you guys, it's a stupid joke. That's all it is. She made a joke about how the Constitution prevents monarchies and prevents a president from establishing a monarchy or anything like that. And she made a joke about how Donald Trump can name his son Barron, but he can't make him a Baron. Okay, whatever. Stupid joke. It's an impeachment hearing. It's not time to work on your improv. It's not time to work on your comedy routine. This is a serious procedure. Like, it's an impeachment hearing. Like, this is serious business. But everybody latched onto that to say, oh my God, look at this woman. She has TDS. She's making fun of Barron. Oh my God, let's just discredit the whole thing. And it's like, guys, it's a stupid joke that she kind of ass backwardly apologized for. Not really, but like an apology in that way that you don't really want to apologize for something because you don't think you have anything to apologize for, but you have to make certain sounds with your mouth to make it sound like you feel bad about saying a certain thing. That's how that went down. But it was just, everybody needs to calm the hell down. Like, everybody took this and just ran with it. And even Melania actually got on Twitter and said something about it. And it wasn't a swipe at Barron Trump. It was a swipe at Donald Trump. Honestly, it was just using the name Barron to try to make a dumb joke. And it's just like, it's one of those examples of just how ridiculous this has gotten as far as public reaction to things and what people want to latch onto and what counts as actual like commentary on an event versus just taking one thing and taking it out of context and just running with it. And it's just like, I know I keep coming back to this, but just the bad faith in which so many people are taking this and how many people just already made up their minds before hearing anything, and just anything that can possibly contribute to confirmation bias, they're going to grasp onto and run with it, no matter how fucking ridiculous it really is when you look at the whole general scheme of things. So that's that. Anyway, I want to move on to something that actually came out of this hearing that is actually important and actually something worth discussing. Not stupid jokes, an actual discussion. And that is Jonathan Turley's argument. And like I said, he was the one who was brought in by Republicans. And his argument is not so much that there isn't impeachable offenses to be had here. He's making the argument that this whole procedure has been, in his opinion, too rushed. It's gone by too fast. We're going forward without hearing from fact witnesses, and that this whole thing just, it's too flimsy. There's not enough information. This is going too fast. We need to slow down. Okay. I want to address some of that because, like I said, this is actually the interesting part to come out of this hearing. And one of the points that he made was that the House Intelligence Committee should have subpoenaed key witnesses, which, to their credit, they did. They did subpoena witnesses, and here's where my philosophical side and my practical side kind of conflict. The argument that Turley makes, and that a lot of people have made in the same vein, is that House Intelligence should have done more to try to conscript those people that they subpoenaed to show up, and they should have subpoenaed more people. Okay, fine. Here's the thing, though. The White House has made it very, very clear through both official and unofficial channels that they have no interest whatsoever in cooperating with any House investigation related to impeachment. I mean, White House legal counsel has sent, it's either 2 or 3 letters at this point to the various committees saying that they are not cooperating. They think this is a sham. They think it's stupid. They're not sending anybody. They're telling people not to cooperate. Trump has been very open about this. I mean, it's just, I don't know what else exactly they could possibly say to make it any more clear that they're not cooperating. So, here's the thing. Philosophically speaking, sure, House Intelligence Committee could have taken this through the courts, and trust and believe the White House would have took this all the way to the Supreme Court, no matter how long that would have took, as far as whether anybody in the White House who has been subpoenaed has to oblige a congressional subpoena. Take it all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court looks at this, says, well, yes, Congress is a co-equal branch of government. If you have a congressional subpoena, then yes, you have to show up when you are being asked to show up. Okay, so Supreme Court decides this. Everybody who's subpoenaed has to show up to their hearing. You know what's going to happen next? Everybody who doesn't want to testify is going to show up to their hearing, plead the fifth, and sit mute. Because you can't force somebody to testify. You can't force people to open their mouth and make sounds come out of it. So you could go through that whole process. That would have taken God knows how many months, and still ended up in the same place of these people are not testifying. So at what point do you look at this and say, okay, well, the White House has made it very clear that they do not wish to cooperate, even though we have subpoenaed people. We have invited them to come whenever they wish. Trump was invited to answer written questions, and they said no, so we're moving on without them. Like, I don't think that's an invalid response to what has come out of the White House. So, again, there's an argument there that you could have gone through the whole rigmarole of going through the courts, but practically speaking, you'd still end up in the same place, which is that these people are just not going to cooperate with any kind of House impeachment investigation. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of don't fault House Intelligence for closing down their hearings and submitting their reports without going through that whole process, because, I mean, it would have been pointless. It would have been absolutely freaking pointless. So at some point, you just have to accept people at face value when they say we're not cooperating, and just say, well, you know what? Then we're moving on without you. We're not waiting for you. We're not going to try to compel you to do something that you can't really compel somebody to do anyway. I mean, that's the whole point of the Fifth Amendment. You can't force somebody to testify against themselves. Everybody knows that. So why bother? Why drag this out any longer than it needs to be dragged out before it goes to the Senate? You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I feel about that argument. Another argument that he made is the idea that in the House that you kind of need to try the case. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the House's role in the impeachment process. And even Justin Amash discussed this on Twitter, in that Turley's opinion on this was incorrect, because the House's job here is to decide if there is enough evidence. Basically, if you're comparing this to, say, a criminal trial, like a grand jury trial, the point of the House is to look at the evidence presented in these reports compiled by intelligence and by judiciary, and see if there's enough there to charge the president with articles of impeachment, and then to decide what those articles are going to look like. That's their job. It's not their job to try to ascertain whether or not these things are true or false. That's the Senate's job. The Senate's job is to have the trial. The House's job is to just to decide that, okay, there's enough evidence here to go forward with charging the president with articles of impeachment. So trying to apply this higher standard to the House than what is constitutionally called for makes no sense. Like, that's not how this works at all. And then the next argument that he tried to make was that you can't impeach a president unless you can prove that he committed a federal crime. That's just blatantly wrong. You do not have to prove that the president committed a federal crime in order to go forth with impeachment. And a lot of people contrasted his testimony over this past week to testimony he gave back in '98 during the Clinton impeachment, where on these topics he felt entirely different. He felt that obviously that he understood the House's proper role. He didn't feel like you had to prove that the president committed a federal crime in order to charge him with articles of impeachment. I mean, people's opinion can change. And so I won't slam Turley for that, and I won't sit here and say that he was brought in by Republicans to say certain things and to do certain things and be a certain way. I don't know, dude. Maybe his opinions really did change since '98. But the arguments that he offered were just not correct on many levels. So a lot of people have taken umbrage to that and pointed out and have just spilled lots and lots of digital ink on Turley's arguments. And even with all that, he still had to admit in his opening statements that, and this is a direct quote, the use of military aid for a quid pro quo to investigate one's political opponent, if proven, can be an impeachable offense. Which that statement encapsulates the whole point of this particular impeachment inquiry. It was not to try to determine any new facts. It was not to enter any new facts into evidence. It was to determine whether, if these things that he is being accused of, if Trump is being accused of, are indeed impeachable offenses. And even Turley had to admit that, yes, if this is true, if this is what happened, that is indeed an impeachable offense, and you should go forward with articles of impeachment. So, yeah. I mean, even after all that, the Republican constitutional scholar still had to admit that, yeah, there's a there. So, anyway, moving on from that, on Saturday, House Judiciary released their report on their one hearing, which, like I said when I did the episode on the intelligence report, Nancy Pelosi has already called for articles of impeachment. So I guess this is happening. Not quite sure when, but House Judiciary did release their own report on their findings. Now, their report is kind of an update of an ongoing report. It's kind of in addition to the report that was created during the Clinton impeachment trial, which that in and of itself was in addition to the report created during the Nixon impeachment trial. And it focuses on kind of the constitutionality of this and whether constitutional / case law, for lack of a better term, applies here, and whether the current circumstances meet the criteria for impeachment. And according to the committee, since the House began its impeachment inquiry, a number of inaccurate claims have been circulated about how impeachment works under the Constitution. To assist the committee in its deliberations, we addressed 6 issues of potential relevance. 1. The law that governs House procedure for impeachment. 2. The law that governs the evaluation of evidence, including where the president orders defiance of House subpoenas. 3. Whether the president can be impeached for abuse of his executive power. 4. Whether the president's claims regarding his motives must be accepted at face value. 5. Whether the president is immune from impeachment if he attempts an impeachable offense but is caught before he completes it. And 6. Whether it is preferable to wait until the next election when a president has sought to corrupt that very same election. So that kind of gives you a flavor of what is addressed in the House Judiciary Committee report. And mind you, these reports are not only made solely for the House to decide on articles of impeachment. These also get kicked up to the Senate for their perusal and kind of so they can get the knowledge of kind of where we're at with this and like what the evidence is, where we're at with the procedures, everything like that. So yeah, that happened. Like I said, it's been a week. It's been a week. So now the next hearings are on Monday the 7th. And now we're going to be having hearings based on the findings of both the intelligence and judiciary reports. So at this point, I'm not quite sure who is going to be in on these meetings. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be the full House. But now we're at the point of discussing the reports and the contents within. And then based off of those 2 reports, you're going to get articles of impeachment. Now, I already gave my predictions in the last episode. I think you can tell by that kind of summary of the House Judiciary report where they are going and where they are thinking, and it's definitely going to be an abuse of power sort of thing. I think that the impoundment clause is obviously going to come up. So when we're going to get articles of impeachment, I'm not entirely sure, but we are moving on. This is happening. The train has left the station. We're going to get articles of impeachment, which on the topic of articles of impeachment, Justin Amash came out publicly and said that pending knowing what the articles actually are and the context of them, he is a yes vote. And he said that he would vote yes on obstruction. He would vote yes on abuse of power. So he did temper it by saying that, of course, he needs to see the articles first. But it does seem like he is a yes vote, which is surprising yet not surprising. I mean, I would have been more surprised if he was a no vote after everything that has happened to this man. If he voted no after all that, like, I don't know. But of course, people are going to bitch, whine, moan, and complain about it because it's Justin Amash, and yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, obviously, he's not a Republican anymore. He kind of got quit. And that was a whole nother thing that I discussed back when it happened, how he was treated by the GOP, by fellow Republicans, by fellow House Freedom Caucus members for daring to think that, hey, maybe there's something to this. But yeah, so far he probably is a yes vote. I think there's a couple of Democrat no votes floating around out there, but we'll see what ends up happening after the whole hearing/whip process, whether they do end up voting no or not. But it's interesting to know that Amash is officially on board with voting yes for articles of impeachment. But the last thing that I want to pivot to and discuss before I close out this episode, and that is the stupid dumb NATO summit, which feel however you want to feel about NATO. Anyway, Trump goes to the NATO summit. And during, I guess, a cocktail hour, I'm not entirely sure what the context was of this, somebody got on video, Justin Trudeau, Boris Johnson, and somebody else who I didn't quite recognize, basically making fun of Trump. Making fun of the fact that he has to have like a 40-minute press conference before sitting down and having these public meets, and just basically making fun of him. So obviously, this goes viral. Trump finds out about it, obviously. And his response is to basically take his ball and go home. And his response was, well, I guess I've held enough press conferences, so I'm just going to leave. It's like, Jesus Christ. So he ended up leaving NATO early. Yeah. I mean, that's... What else would you expect? and Joe Biden turned this all into a campaign ad. Okay, cool. Whatever. Yes, everybody's laughing at Trump. Everybody laughs at Trump. Everybody knows this. Like, I don't think any world leaders actually take this dude seriously. And some people try to spin that as some kind of, like, plus for him. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you have to have a president, it would be nice for other countries to take him seriously and not, like, laugh at him behind his back. I don't know. Anyway, that happened. Totally ridiculous. Was funny for, like, 24 hours, and then everybody forgot about it. Like, there was so many, like, little tiny small news cycles this week. Maybe that's why it feels like it was so long. But anyway, that pretty much wraps up that. I mean, there's not a whole hell of a lot to say about the NATO summit. I mean, it's a NATO summit, just like every other NATO summit, except for Donald Trump getting all pissy because people made fun of him. So we left early. But that's Trump. That's about par for the course. So, yeah, that pretty much wraps up this week. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you did make it this far, thank you as always. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and my Patreon page. Take care, and until next time.